So today we're going to install Windows 95 on a virtual machine using Microsoft's Virtual PC 2007. Now I'm using Microsoft Virtual PC 2007 because it has compatibility for Windows 95 compared to Oracle's VM VirtualBox software, and certainly VMware's player doesn't have support for it either, so we're going to do it this way. So we're going to click the New button. And now we're going to have the new virtual machine wizard pop up. And it's just going to kind of guide us along here and setting it up. Click Next. Yes, we want to create a virtual machine. We're going to call it Windows 95 C, and I'll explain why I'm calling it C. You can also browse to a specific location where you want to save it. Right now it's going to save it in the default folder. I'm going to use the Windows 98 settings, but we're going to change that. We're going to adjust the RAM for Windows 95 down to 16 megabytes. We're going to make a new virtual hard disk as well. That's where we can specify our virtual partition. Now for Windows 95, we're going to stick with 2000 megabytes, or 2 gigs approximately. And the reason for that is because most versions of Windows 95 use the FAT16 file system, FAT16. And the maximum partition size is 2 gigabytes, so that's what I'm specifying by 2000 megabytes, so that we can use that. Now, Windows 95 B and C can go larger than that, and of course I'll explain again while we're going through setup. So now we're going to finish this. This is going to create the virtual. Now I've already gone ahead and clicked Start, and it started up the virtual machine. I'm going to actually reset it here to show you what it actually does when you first start it. It'll look like a normal machine, auto-detecting devices with a BIOS and main board system and everything showing there. Now there's no operating system, so it's trying to do a network boot. And we don't want this, so I need to specify a Windows 95 ISO file. I'm going to do this off to the side. Now, of course, you want an actual Windows 95 CD, if you've got one, to get a hold of it, because that's what you'll need. And we'll talk about the different versions again. I gotta find where I stored it. Here it is. In there, and in there, and Windows 95C. Now I'll reset again to get it to start booting off a CD. Now, when I said there was different versions of Windows 95, the version I'm installing here is Windows 95C. This was the latest version of Windows 95, the last edition before Microsoft came out with Windows 98. And the version that people are probably most familiar with is Windows 95 version A, or 95A. And that came out shortly after the original 95 that kind of became mainstream on most computers. Running Windows 95, it had some improvements and stuff to that. But again, it used the FAT16 file system. So you had 2 gigabyte max partition, so a lot of your computers back then only had 1 or 2 gigabyte size hard drives in them because of that. And it had some support for a couple of other things, but that was mainly the big deal is the FAT16 file system and the graphical user environment it came with compared to Windows 3.1 before it. Now, Windows 95B and Windows 95C introduced FAT32, which could support 80 gigabyte partitions instead of just 2 gigabyte partitions, and it also introduced USB connectivity, which was USB 1.0 at the time, and all that stuff went into Windows 98, which became standardized with FAT32 and USB. So Windows 95C here, I could have used a larger hard drive when I was setting it up, but I'm doing it in 2 gigabyte size so that it's compatible with all versions of Windows 95 for whatever version you're trying to install in your virtual machine. Now, anyway, we loaded the ISO file that I had, and it automatically launched it and brought me to the Windows 95 setup. It's just your normal setup stuff. I'm going to press enter, and since the partition has not been formatted or had the file system put on it yet, it's currently unallocated. So we're going to have set up automatically configure that unallocated disk space. And again, we don't want to use large disk support. We could, in this scenario, since we're using 95C, if I said yes, enable large disk support, it would use FAT32, but we don't need FAT32 since it's only 2 gigs. So we're going to use FAT16. We're going to say no. Instead of we'll restart the computer, we'll leave the disk in there. It'll automatically relaunch setup. Now what it has done is it has established the FAT16 file system. Now it's formatting the partition so it's ready to copy data onto it. Yeah, it's done. Now we're going to run scan disk, which was really quick. And now we're in Windows 95 setup. And we're going to click on the window here. Now you may get a dialog saying something about the virtual machine capturing the mouse pointer and using it in there, because as you see I can't move this pointer outside the window now. And we'll discuss why it does that when we get to the part about installing the guest editions, which is going to be later on. So right now we're in Windows 95 setup, and just what your normal Windows 95 setup would look like if you were installing it on a normal desktop that supported this operating system. So we're going to click continue. It's going to start loading all the stuff it needs to off of the ISO image that I have. Of course, we're going to accept the license agreement, because if we don't, we stop the video right here. And that's going to do the normal data collection, as of course we want it in C Windows. Now I'm going to go to custom because I want to install everything. And of course you need a certificate of authenticity to install Windows 95, so it's another reason why you got to have a valid copy. And here's an interesting thing. I had Windows 95 so long when I was young, and the software that I installed from Windows 95 on Windows 98, that I actually ended up memorizing a certificate of authenticity key from Windows 95. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to type it in here real quick. I didn't even have to look at anything. That came all straight out of my head. Now we're going to go into putting in our user information, so I'll just put my stuff in there. And yes, we do want to look for the hardware because we don't want to try to install it later. And since we've specified a network adapter and we have a sound card in here too, Microsoft Virtual PC 2007 emulates a Sound Blaster 16 sound card. So that's what you gotta know, by the way. And it also emulates a generic network adapter if you enable network pass-through to use the internet in your virtual machine. So we'll set all that stuff up now. We're getting into the configuration of stuff now. I'm just going to enable all this stuff since there's plenty of storage for it. Let me go into details and this stuff as well. Now, of course, you can't really emulate a dial-up modem through these, but if you had a dial-up modem connected through a PC communications port, if you still have one, you could actually use a dial-up modem through your virtual machine. I'm going to set that up. Call this Windows 95C. This is all just little network stuff. It also, since I'm here, I should also mention Virtual PC 2007 emulates an S3 Trio graphics adapter. So it'll give you a little bit of graphics memory, but it's only 4 megabytes. So don't be enthusiastic on trying to run any graphically intensive stuff on this rather wimpy video adapter that it uses. VirtualBox is better for that, but this is more supporting of this version of Windows. I'm going to click Next. No, we don't need a startup disk. And now we're going to copy files. And now you get to watch how Microsoft describes Windows 95 to its users as it installs Windows. And you will see an install speed you would have never seen on a Windows 95 era computer. Easier to use. Windows 95 is the easiest Windows yet. Windows 95 is faster and more efficient. You can do more of what you want to do. Windows 95 has been improved to provide high-powered performance. Accessibility options. Oh yeah, all that. This also introduced all that lovely sound sentry and sticky keys and num keys that people in schools like to do with the sweet, 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 sweet sounds with the computer keyboards by holding down a key long enough to activate the shortcut for it. I'm pretty certain some people remember doing that. Microsoft Exchange. I never used it, but I know a lot of people that had to do business communications use that. And the very early version of the Microsoft Network. This actually had something for web browsing then. Sign up with the Microsoft Network today and get connected. And of course, this was the day of dial-up. No one was talking about cable and DSL modems for internet connectivity. We're almost done here and about to restart. I'm going to have to take the ISO file out, as it's going to try to start again once we get done here. I'll stop the video again. And we're ready. We're going to click finish and it's going to restart. And of course it's just detecting the CD in there. Release. Getting ready to run Windows 95 for the first time. Now there may be a problem here. When it tries to start Windows the first time, we'll see if it actually does it. I'm just going to put my name in here, just get past that screen. Windows 95 now setting up your hardware and any plug-and-play devices you have. Now here's the problem. The problem here is the CD-ROM drive is not accessible. So I cannot install any of the necessary files that I need. Or no, I can't. It doesn't do it here. So we have to actually end up hitting the cancel. This is for the S3 graphics drivers and some of the network stuff. We can actually install all that stuff later, once Windows is fully loaded with 32-bit drivers. It's running on 16-bit drivers now, but there's no CD-ROM driver loaded in DOS. Yeah, it's kind of a technical thing for people that understand all that stuff. It may be beyond the current generation at the moment. But we'll get this going. And we're on the eastern side. And this was during a time before daylight savings time got changed. So we don't want to have it try to configure it. I want to configure it manually. And we got sound too. Of course, that's coming through my speakers. I don't have it ported through directly to a audio jack. There's the video system. Yes, I wonder if some people are nostalgic about hearing those old chord and ta-da sounds again, and the dings and the chimes. And of course, Windows 95C had version 3 of Microsoft Internet Explorer. That's why it shows that. And then it's asking for the S3 drivers again, but we can put our CD back in there, so I'm going to do that right now. That accidentally came up because I hit the Windows key and Windows isn't fully loaded yet. Do it D, navigate to D. We're going to navigate to Windows 95. That's your install directory where all your cabinet files are that hold all the data. And we get to hear that old familiar Microsoft sound, as they call it. Yes, it was in fact called the Microsoft sound in the sound properties. Now we got Windows 95 loaded here. Let me stop the video here before I lose it all. And now we're back here with Windows 95 again. Now, as you can see, Virtual PC 2007 has brought up a dialog box here talking about the virtual machine additions that I was talking about earlier in the video. And like it says, the virtual machine additions, they provide enhanced performance and integration features on the guest operating systems. And of course, Windows 95 here being the guest operating systems. And it includes pointer integration. And if you saw what happened in the Windows 95 setup earlier, I couldn't move the mouse pointer outside the window. With pointer integration, I can move from the host operating system into the guest operating system just by dragging the mouse pointer in and out of it. And so I don't have to click on the window. And also I can drag and drop files between the host and guest operating system, and also it synchronizes the clock on the guest and host operating system together so I don't have to change them. And a couple of other small things. I don't need to show it again. Now, there's an interesting little caveat here though with Windows 95. While Virtual PC 2007 supports Windows 95, the virtual machine additions that it comes with supports Windows 98 at the earliest. So it will not run or install the additions on 95. So the workaround is to download the older version of Virtual PC, which is the 2004 version. And that has the additions that supports both Windows 95 and MS-DOS. So when I install stuff like Windows 3.1 or MS-DOS, it will support those as well with the DOS additions. But it's a little tricky because when you download Virtual PC 2004, it comes as a zip file. So you have to extract the zip file, and then you open that folder of files, and you'll find the Virtual PC 2004 installer. Now you're going to need a program that handles archives like 7-zip. So you can go download 7-zip, and once you have that installed, you need to right-click on that installer, and then go to the little 7-zip submenu and tell it to extract the installer files to that same location there, because you want to get the additions image file out of that to run in Virtual PC. Now when you get it, it'll be called additions ISO. You need to rename that and put a period between additions and ISO, because ISO is the file extension for an image, a disk image. And that way then you'll be able to use it in the program here. Now I've already gone ahead and done all of that, so I can't really show it. But we'll go to the CD, we'll capture a new ISO, and I'll drag this window over here. That's my Windows 95 image I've been using. But here's Virtual PC 2004. It's Service Pack 1. That's the version I downloaded. And there's the folder that came out of the installer after I extracted it with 7-zip. That's actually this one right here. That was the folder. There, in it. So it'll bring up this folder here. We double click that, and here's the additions ISO file. We double click that. It'll automatically mount it in the virtual machine, and it'll start the install for that. And we'll have the additions installed. Now there's one other little piece of stuff we're going to install on Windows 95 as well that's crucial because it may cause problems for some users, because it's related to the processor speed of the host operating system that you're running the Windows 95 virtual machine on. So right now we'll go ahead and take care of these additions, and we'll get to that other section when it comes. Click next. Install all this stuff. And again, this will let you do drag and drop file sharing and pointer integration and stuff like that, so you won't have to click in and out of the window. We'll go ahead and restart again. And while it's doing that, when you first try to boot Windows up after you install it from the setup, when we had that getting ready to start Windows 95 for the first time, there's a certain networking component. Wait for this sound to stop. There's a certain networking component that uses a driver. It has a .vxd extension on it. And some people might know what I'm talking about that have tried to do this before. And I don't know off the top of my head what VXD stood for as the extension, but there's a documented issue where if your host computer's processor is faster than 2.1 gigahertz, this file reading the frequency of the host computer's processor, if it's higher than that, it's going to cause a divide by zero error in that file. And Windows is going to halt. And when I mean halt, it means it's going to stop loading. It's just not going to load. And you'll get a little thing that says Windows protection error with the error pertaining to that particular .vxd file. And there's a download somebody has that updates that VXD file if you have that problem. Now, it's in the form of a virtual floppy disk image, which you can also mount. And I'm going to go ahead and do that here as well. And that will automatically update all that stuff. And it will also add a couple of extra networking capabilities to Windows itself. It's kind of an update package for it that addresses that problem. So let me see if I go find that file first and come back to this. And we're back. So we're going to go ahead and mount that floppy image. So we can go ahead and get that in there. Navigate here to where I've got that stored. Here it is. This is the image, and it's called Fix95 CPU. And it comes in both a floppy disk image and as an ISO file if you want to use it as a bootable CD. It will also work as a bootable floppy. So we'll go ahead and mount this floppy. And there's the computer. Now we're going to have to install this before the operating system starts up. So I'm going to restart Windows. I'm also going to unmount the CD, which it has been. Now you can see the mouse pointer integration. I can move in and out here. So the pointer integration is working. Now here's it. It's a Windows 95 high-speed processor support setup. It was put together by Lone Crusader. It updates that VXD thing. Because again, it has speed greater than 2.1, you get that divided by zero error. So I don't need to view the README file. Go ahead and install. Press any disk. It's restarting. Let's release the floppy image. And again, you'll need to use that if you run into a problem where Windows will not boot with a protection error. That's the first thing you want to look at. And that's it. We're done. Windows 95 is up and running. It's ready to use. Get my computer. We only use 179 megabytes for Windows 95. Compare that to the installation size of Windows operating systems today, like Windows 7 or Windows 8. You'll also notice that Windows 95 opens everything in a new window. That's one of the things Windows 95 does. But I might have a separate video for those that want it on how to use this old Windows 95 operating system, since it's much older than what many people that are watching this may be used to. So again, this whole video has been about installing Windows 95 version C for what I've got, but what I've done will work for any version you may have using Microsoft's Virtual PC 2007. Shut down.